I'm your host, Jeff Ellis, formerly of Scout, formerly of 24/7, now all of Locked On. We might have a special guest at points during this podcast today. I'm a cat person. I'm sorry if that makes some people out there mad. If you are an anti-cat person, but I have a 14-year-old cat. He is currently sitting behind my computer, but when he gets a little late at night and gets lonely, I figured better to let him hang out nearby, possibly make some guest appearances, than deal with him crying in the background. So, just warning that ahead of time. Could have some guest appearance on the show. And hey, I mean, cats make the internet go round, right? So we're going to do a mailbag for the show today. We will see how far that takes us. I can be long-winded, so it could take us the whole show. If not, I do have something set up as a fallback for that third segment on the show. Without further ado, let's just kind of dive in. I've got the questions over here, and starting with from at Glenn Longwell 89. Is Bowers going to get the opposing day nod at first base due to his lack of options? In other words, is there actually a battle for the position, or does Bradley have to have an OPS of 1,500 to win the job for opening day? I think it is Bowers to lose, and I mean, everyone wants to get hot to trot. I mean, about Bobby Bradley's performance. Yeah, he's hit 2 home runs. He's also continuing to do the other things we've seen from him. Is a hitter. He's striking out and he's not walking enough. Pulling up a tweet by Bernie Pleskoff. When I saw this, I was like, yeah, this is all true. He was a former scout with the Astros who's written all over the place. I got to meet him a few years ago when Akron had the All-Star game for AA. He was there to cover it. And he talked about that, like anyone, I was excited when they drafted Bobby Bradley. He was kind of where they got him, he was definitely a value selection. And those first years, he was, a complete hitter in the lower minors. It's another one of those stories where when people are like, why don't you trust low minor stats? And, he's another player where sometimes guys are so good. They can just dominate a level. And then as they move up, you see that they have fewer and fewer actual skills, that a lot of it was just pure ability. And it's not Bobby Bradley, I think, is likely a quad A guy. In fairness, I said the same thing about Jesus Aguilar, and he's turned into about a league average bat. Jesus Aguilar was a cleaner hitter profile, though. He didn't have the obscene power Bradley does, but he definitely had better on-base skills, which is, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much power you have if you can't put the ball in play. But to go back to this tweet here, when I saw Mike Hattery at Hatman EHC, I believe, respond to this, and it got me thinking, even, back in January, that here's the exact quote. I've scouted Bradley since he signed. He has to improve his plate discipline, shorten his swing, recognize pitches quicker, and learn how to hit breaking balls. But he does lots of work needed, but he does have fastball power. Yeah, I get he lost 35 pounds, and those stories are great. But those are the Casey Kochman got LASIK surgery. I always refer to that story because every spring training for the past 20 years that I really followed this stuff in depth. I'm going to turn 40 this summer. So, it was really in my late teens where I got the ability to use the internet and follow things really in depth when it came to the Indians. But ever since then, there's been one of these stories. And to me, the one that always comes to mind more than any other is the Indians signed Casey Kochman when he was about 2 years removed from being decent. And even at his peak, he was a good defender at first, which is a marginal value, and a league average bat. The whole thing was he was going to have a big bounce back year because he got LASIK surgery and he could actually see the ball. Well, if you can remember back to that Casey Kochman season, it didn't matter if he could see the ball because he couldn't hit it. And Bobby Bradley dropping 35 pounds is great, but that doesn't change the fact that he's got a long swing. It doesn't change the fact that pitch recognition has been a big issue in the upper minors, and it doesn't change the fact he doesn't walk. You can lose a lot of weight and get stronger, but strength was never the issue with him. I think people get excited because he hits the ball hard. I understand that, and he's put up great power numbers. But the problem for Bobby Bradley, and I brought this up repeatedly, is first, he's a first base only guy. Like, if he could play an outfield position, there'd be a chance for him to break in with the Indians. I mean, for all of Bauer's issues, he can play outfield. The profile isn't as exciting for him at either position, but at least he can play multiple positions. And the number two part is Bobby Bradley is a one-trick pony. It's power. He doesn't walk enough to add value there. He doesn't hit for enough average to have value there. He's probably going to strike out close to 40% of the time if he is up in the big leagues. He's already a high strikeout guy. And defensively, it isn't there. And defensively, he could get better due to the lost weight. That's one of those areas we could see improvement. But for a guy who already had a long swing and had issues with recognizing pitches quickly, losing that weight doesn't change anything. He's going to hit the ball farther, hit the ball harder, but that's already what he did. That's not something that's going to improve his skills in terms of making this team. So I think it is Bauer's position to lose. I think he will likely get that spot because, again, flexibility. He can do more than just play first base DH, and him being out of options is a big deal. Now, at the same time, if the Indians decide to go to another way, I also wouldn't be shocked by that either because they thought so little of Bauers that they didn't even try him last year. And that's kind of a bigger issue in general when we want to talk about the Indians, is how they've not been trying these young players out. And there's another question I saw coming up about that. And that is a legit issue, and that is a legit concern. And that's why we have so many question marks right now, is because they haven't given a lot of these young players a chance yet. So we don't really know what they can do. We don't really know what can translate. None of that stuff is really known to us. And that is, like I said, that's an issue. It's another question we'll get to. Bobby Bradley could conceivably play his way onto the team. I'm still not buying him. I stick by what I've seen when I've scouted him. And I will admit, I don't have the best track record with first base only prospects. I tend to undervalue them just in general because of positional value. And I kind of need an exceptional bat, a bat that I think can be better than league average to make me think that player is worthwhile. And like I said, I could easily be proven wrong, but everything he has done, he is the same hitter, same problems. If those don't improve, I think Bauers is still the favorite right now. Let's take another quick one here from Hiram. If local anything at all, you know Hiram. I don't need to give you a screen name. Hopefully, I'll let him know that I mentioned him in this one. He likes to give me, tease me a bit from time to time, but all in good fun. But Hiram asks, is Yu Chang making the push for a second base job? I don't think so. If you recall to last year, he did the exact same thing. He hit the ball hard in spring training, and he really didn't get much of a look last year. He's another one of those guys. And I was very high on him at points. I had him as a top 5 prospect in the system multiple times, basically because he could walk. Not a ton, but he would walk enough to make it a skill you could count on. He had power potential. He hit for power in Akron, which is a harder place to hit for power than some major league parks. And he could play shortstop. Wasn't going to win any awards there, but I thought he could be a league average shortstop who'd hit about 230, 20 home runs, walk like 10% of the time. That's a starter's profile. I'm personally still not willing to give up on that, but especially with them signing Cesar Hernandez, I just can't see it right now for Yu Chang. And let's be honest, the Indians keep signing these vets to minor league contracts, and then Tito wants them on the team. And you go back to 2019, the revolving door of wasted at-bats on guys like Carlos Gonzalez and Hanley Ramirez. And we can keep going where instead of, Chang was hurt at the time, in fairness, but for a lot of the other players, instead of giving them extended looks, we keep giving guys like Mike Freeman more at-bats. And we know what Mike Freeman is. And we have such a glut of middle infielders. It feels like you're hurting the team if Mike Freeman makes this team. and someone like Chang does not. I hope he gets a chance. I hope he gets more at bats than he got a year ago. But he's another player, and we'll just keep talking about this, who did not get the at bats that I thought that he needed to let us see if this is a potential starter or not for the Cleveland Indians. Real quick, let's take a break and talk about our sponsor, betonline.ag. Last week, I went through and read some of the lines for the Indians. If you caught that, we'll check back in during the season to see what the lines are for the various awards for the Cleveland Indians. But the big things to know is BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. Football might be over, but the NBA, college basketball, and NHL are in full swing. BetOnline even covers awards, TV shows, and reality TV. Real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine. BetOnline has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds. It is the best way to place your bets, and it's free to sign up. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON to get that 50% sign-up bonus. And while you're here, betting on baseball doesn't have to be a guessing game. If you listen to the new Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling, get your daily picks, blowout specials, wrong team, favored picks, and Lee Sterling's lock of the day. Subscribe to Locked On Bets podcast, brought to you by betonline.ag, wherever you get podcasts. So we're 2 questions in, 10 minutes into the show. Should have known I'd be a bit of a long-winded speaker, as I typically am. So let's Jason Burke at by Jason B. Hi, Jason. Jason is the host of Locked On Athletics and used to be back in my Scout days. He ran the San Francisco Giants site on Scout as some background. I think I actually brought him to the network. Funny twist. I approached him when I was trying to make sure we had everything filled in. So, hey, Jeff, first time, long time. What can we expect from Tristan McKenzie in 2021? Split season. I still think he probably starts the year off-site. I know that's not what most people are guessing at, but when you start him off-site, it's a way to keep the innings down, and it's a way to delay service time. And when you combine those two for a guy who didn't pitch at all in 2019 and missed, the first month and a half of 2018 due to a back injury, it makes a lot of sense. I still think he likely, especially because they don't have as many needs in the early schedule, and with their depth, they can find ways to make it work. They're going to have so many pitchers, Eli Morgan, Scott Moss. Those are guys I don't think, Sam Hentges, I don't think make the team, but are going to be there to fill in at points. So I wouldn't be surprised Logan Allen see some of those players up in the early goings as they kind of juggle. McKenzie, 33 innings last year, I believe, top of my head, 0 the year before. Do you even want him to go over 100? And if that's the case, if you're going to keep him around 100 innings, maybe 120, he's really only someone who's going to go 5-6 innings. He's not a guy who can take you deep into games with just the way he is and the fade in his velocity. That's maybe 15 starts this year. You're pushing it. I think you go like 15, and then because you're hoping you'll make the postseason, and then from there, you at least have him available and at full strength. So if you're only looking at 15 starts, a delayed start makes a lot of sense. And then he wants to know between Franmil, Bowers, and Naylor, who has the best season. I think it's Franmil. He has been consistently an above league average bat. We have not seen that with Naylor. We definitely haven't seen that from Bowers. This is a safe, easy bet. The Franmil is going to have the best season. And what should we expect from Emmanuel Clase? I worry we're putting too many eggs in the Clase basket. I'm as guilty as anyone because that arm it's nice. He's got some of the dirtiest stuff just in the whole organization. Suspended all of last year, limited innings the year before, very young. He's a guy who could be up and down this year. Luckily, they have a lot of pitching relief prospects over the history of the Cleveland Indians. For as good as they've been at developing starters, they have been horrible at developing relievers. I've talked about that. If now reliever is something that has been kind of a newer thing in baseball in general, but still, when you look at the top 5 relievers in Indians history, in terms of WAR accumulated in Cleveland, David Risky, I think, was fourth, all 3. It's not to have depth. Guys like Hanlon. Depth. Okay. More stream connection issues, so I'm going to apologize for that now. But we'll see if Clase can keep it together, if he can have a strong season start to finish. Even that 1 year in Texas, he was up and down at points. So I'm hoping that there is not an issue. I'm hoping that he is just fantastic and they can run from there with him without any issues at all. From Sports Nom, I always appreciate Nom. Knows a lot of good basketball stuff. I will ask him questions. If you're looking for Cavs information, go check him out. Is this going to be the hardest throwing bullpen in team history? I think so. And I don't think it's that hard compared to, how much of my life has been like Joe Borowski and Bob Wickman. Wickman was the all-time saves leader before Allen came in. In my youth, the strongest closer of before I hit the age of 10 was Doug Jones. It's a team that has a history of soft tossing relievers. And if Nick Wetgren does end up the closer, which we've seen some talk about, they'll have someone else in that mold. But the guys like Clase, even if, I still think Henkes, that's going to be his best role long term. So just let him go back there and unleash. At Topher suspended, Topher sinking ship. Can you remember a time when the Indians had so many players ready to see time in the majors that couldn't get through? Feels like we've never seen enough of Bowers, Bradley, Yu, Johnson, Nolan, Jimenez, etc. this year. Well, Jimenez being new and Nolan Jones honestly wasn't, in a regular season, I think we could have seen him September of last year. I agree with you. I don't understand that. Bobby Bradley has such a limited profile. I thought he was actually a candidate to go off the 40-man in the offseason. I would have liked to have seen more of Daniel Johnson. If Ben Gamble makes his team, I understand why, but I also am going to be disappointed because it would have been nice to see what Daniel Johnson can do. Tool-wise, he's got some of the best just physical tools of any of the Indians' top prospects. I think he should be no worse than a platoon player. And we haven't given him that opportunity. Bowers at least got an extended look, and it was just not good. So there's some defense there. But Chang and Johnson in particular. But, even as I say that about Bowers or Bradley, they had historically bad outfield last year. And that's just not me throwing that word. It was literally historically bad. And they kept running out vets and guys who were, Domingo Santana, Delano Shields, guys who aren't with this organization anymore, and not trying the young kids. And it's, why not? Last year was the perfect chance to finally, Daniel Johnson's 26, or is he 27 now? You shouldn't be worried about his service time. Yu-Cheng Chang has been inconsistently played. Again, these are guys that you don't value enough to give them an everyday opportunity, so there should be no service time worry. And they couldn't have been any worse than what we saw at points last year. And part of me wonders how much of that is when you had Alomar and then, with Tito, both of those are vets coaches that they leaned on, a Mike Freeman instead of a Yu-Cheng Chang. At Elvis leg, at Elvis_leg, no puppet. Doesn't make sense to raise up a crop of middle infielders only to see them either die on the vine or get traded before they realize their full potential. How many real shortstop prospects does the Tribe have right now? And what percentage historically succeed? One could make the case that with Yu-Cheng Chang, he's kind of already dying on the vine, that his value is significantly lower. If you go back to that failed Lucroy deal, remember that was Mejia, Chang, Greg Allen, and Sean Armstrong were the 4 pieces, I believe, reported in that deal. And Chang was the number 2 player. And I distinctly remember, and it was back in the day when I was still at Indians Baseball Insider, and I was doing a podcast with Tony Lastoria over there. We're talking about trades with the Yankees, and it came out even then that the Yankees liked Chang. A lot of people did because of his potential as a shortstop. And he's still waiting for that opportunity. The whole idea about tying on the vine, it makes some sense. If Cesar Hernandez plays well enough to get his option picked up, what happens with Owen Miller? Ty Freeman should be ready at some point in 2021. Gabriel Arias is already on the 40-man. What are they going to do? And you got Jimenez, you got Rosario. Now, there is a world, again, I think, where Rosario ends being the center fielder on this team. I will stand by that. He has the athleticism, the tools, and the traits to find success there. And on the whole, this team doesn't have anyone that I feel comfortable saying is the next up. Like, I don't know about Zimmer as a center fielder. Mercado was brutal last year. And their outfield depth in terms of prospects is very weak. So I would rather just see them put Rosario out there, put Nolan Jones out there, have those guys be the, let the young guys play, see if there's anything. Same thing with Daniel Johnson. But I think the hope is as these players, if Ty Freeman turns into a great second baseman in 2021, 2022, if Gabriel Arias turns into, I think I've talked about before, there's a chance he might be the third base heir apparent as Jose Ramirez and his contract become imminently more tradable every year. And I've talked about next offseason, I'm not shocked if he's moved just because of the limited time control left, because then you're looking at, or, next, not this July, but the July after, because that's that 18-month window where they like to move players. So that a lot of these guys, you can move them. And that's always the value of the shortstop. They can move to another position, find success. You can't move someone to shortstop from, first base. So I think they'll find ways to, the same way that, like, right now, there's no place for Nolan Jones, so he's going to get a lot of reps in the outfield. They're going to find ways to get the best bats in, and hopefully some of these guys will get those opportunities. Let's take another quick break to talk about another fantastic sponsor on the show today. Rockauto.com. So I know nothing about cars. This is one of those things I've talked about many times on the show. But Rock Auto is an easy to navigate site, easy to understand, even for someone like myself who doesn't know about cars. And it's a great way when you have something that breaks on your car. And when I say you, I just mean people in general. For the most part, we just go and we trust people. We take their word at the cost. This allows you to have a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more confidence, right? Go keep this in your back pocket. Keep Rock Auto, family-owned business, as a way you can always check yourself. You can be like, okay, is this really a good deal on this piece? Or maybe you know someone who can fix a car, and that's all the better because you can go and find that piece for your car. And that mechanic who's willing to put in the piece you bring, like, you're going to save money because they have one central location, cut down the overhead, and pass that savings on to you, the consumer. And when you go to Locked Auto, remember to write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know who sent you. It could be Locked On Indians, Locked On MLB. Make sure it's some form of Locked On. Amazing selections, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Rockauto.com. And another reminder that tomorrow's show is Crossover Wednesday. I'm going to be talking with the boys over from Locked On White Sox, so check that out. We will be talking all things Central. The White Sox are the division favorites, so it should be an interesting talk between myself and the White Sox crew about how they think things are going to play out. Are they more worried about the Indians or the Twins? Find out tomorrow. So let's dive back into questions. I was saving a question from Pat at tangible_uno. I'm probably going to have Pat on the podcast at some point. He is a really strong writer. I've mentioned him before. Who would you pick for the opening day starting outfield based on ceiling? And I touched on this a little bit, but I think if you were looking pure ceiling for the Indians, I think it's Ahmad Rosario in center field. He's got the arm. He's got the speed. I think almost universally because of physical tools. Yeah, he might have more value because the Reds have a need there. But if you go and you look at the trade value site, which again is very hit or miss, it's like the only trade that makes it, which don't come like Amir Garrett with the Indians bullpen needing a lefty. but a lot of people talk about Nick Senzel. It doesn't match up with value, even with Senzel being a disappointment his 2 years in the bigs. And that's the thing. That's when you look at a Senzel, you look at Rosario. These are both guys who are high end prospects, and they maintain their value for a while. Rosario, it's almost impossible for his value to go down any further. Where it is, it'll maintain throughout the year. Try him out. Let's see what can happen. But physical tools are there for him to play center field. And if the bat can be closer to what we saw in 2019, I mean, that's a slightly above league average bat with a chance to be at least an average defender in center. I think that is your best ceiling in center field. In right field, Daniel Johnson. If everything works there, the power speed combo is as good as anyone in the minors for the Indians. The arm is probably the strongest the Indians have. Legit five-tool guy. The hit tool is always going to be the concern. But you look at that 2019 season, and he made such strides. And I do believe in his ability to be at least a platoon bat. You could argue a Johnson-Luplow platoon is the highest ceiling combo, and I'd be okay with that, except for the fact that in terms of ceiling, I think Nolan Jones is that player. Now, I understand he's a player that it makes sense for him to start the year in the minors, and he hasn't had the best showing so far in spring training, but I'm still buying on the bat, the power, the walk rate, all of those things for his age relative to level. Better athleticism than you think. So a Luplow, Jones platoon, Johnson, and one outfield spot, Rosario in center, Josh Naylor at first base. That's kind of the ideal for me as of now, and just in terms of ceiling. And if everything went perfectly, like that is what we would see come September, because that means Rosario played so well that when Jimenez, took over shortstop, because again, I'm not sure that even with all the talk that he's going to start the year with the team, because service time manipulation is a big deal for the Cleveland Indians to gain extra years of control and to keep salaries low. They have everything set up so Rosario can get those reps at the start of the year. And if he's hitting, the chance to play him in left, or like I said, I think center field, he has the tools to play there, would be ideal. So that is my ideal ceiling outfield. At Kyle Gajowski, at KGA Jow, who is your pick for surprise? Who's your pick for a surprise breakout play for the Indians this year? So who's off the beaten path a bit for the Indians? Part of me wants to, Logan Allen also had that weight loss story that, or I would talk about him just because I was a big fan of him when he came over in that trade. But let's try to avoid anyone who's had a spring training story that is the, as I called it, the Casey Kochman LASIK equivalent. So just looking at the Indians' top prospects, and then just looking at their bench in general, who is the surprise breakout? And I guess that's always the question. It's like, if Cal Quantrill is as good as a lot of us think he could be, is that a surprise breakout? There's so many. It's when you're at the depth level of someone who's hosting a daily Indians podcast, you're like, well, what counts as a surprise player? Because I feel like it can't be anyone who's a projected starter for this season, right? Or would be a projected starter if not for service time manipulation. And then I immediately kind of eliminate relievers, and then from there I go. So it's like, who could actually affect the Indians conceivably this year? Who's a surprise? And that is where I struggle, because it's that part. I'm like, well, who counts? Like, even in my mind, I was going down the list here. I'm like, well, I kind of like Daniel Johnson, but I mean, I'm projecting him as a guy who should get some reps this year. So is he really count as a surprise? Like that's the internal debate I'm having. Okay. I'm going to throw this out there. Eli Morgan. Now, I've been high on Eli Morgan since the Indians drafted him in the 8th round. If you were following my draft coverage back in the day, I literally talked about before the start of the 8th round that year. I tweeted at the Tribe Insider account and just kind of sat back and said, hey, so is this the round where the Indians are going to add Eli Morgan? And then they added him 27 picks later. And the reason I projected that as a player who would be just on the Indians' radar was undersized, great secondary offering, best changeup in the entire draft. And the question is, would he ever have another pitch? Now, and also great command control numbers. Like, they are a team that do look at walk rate and strikeouts to walk rate and things like that. And in his time through the minors, Morgan has stayed excellent. Go look up the numbers. I mean, it's not excuse me, not surprising with a changeup as good as his was and his age relative to level that, in 2017, his ERA was 1. 2018 across 2 levels, a 1.83 and then a 3.91 for 133 innings. Then he gets the next year a 1.87, a 3.79. And then I had people ask me about, well, you're worried about AAA. I'm like, it's 5 innings. You're not worried about that. And maybe I'm too quick to do this because I've said the same thing about Hentges as well. When I look at a Morgan, I look at Hentges, I see guys who really have 2 pitches. Like, Morgan has 4 legitimate pitches, but the problem is they're not all league average. And then the question more becomes, as I said, special guest. When you talk about Morgan, is the fastball good enough? That's essentially the question. But if he's coming out of the pen, which I think is his best role, then you're hoping the fastball maybe plays up a little bit more. And that changeup is a legit weapon. That's one of those changes that can get out righties, it can get out lefties. I'm completely sold on it. And if this team does cycle through some relievers and starters at points, I mean, they added Morgan to the 40-man. They did not want to risk exposing him because they knew there'd be a good chance they'd lose him. And the control numbers are great. The performance in the minors is great. He's undersized. He doesn't have great velocity, but his changeup might be the best changeup in the Indians minors. I've said for a while, put him in the pen and fast track him. Like I said, I have some issues in terms of, like I talked about earlier, I'm not the best when it comes to first base evaluations because I just need more from the bat for me to trust it. And then I'm also tend to be very quick to shift pitchers. The Indians like to give guys every chance to prove that they can't be a starter before they move to the pen. Whereas I look at a guy and see, fastball, changeup. Let's just focus on those 2 and go from there. So we'll see. But if you want a surprise pick for who could break out for the Indians this year, Eli Morgan out of the pen. That changeup could be a legit weapon as a reliever working in that role. So we are at 33 minutes. I went long again. So I want to thank everyone who's listening, rating, and reviewing. We had our biggest week ever on the pod. We just got that update this on Monday. Biggest week ever. So thank you all who are downloading daily, listening, rating, and reviewing, alerting a friend, whatever it is helping, it is working out. I have, by and large, the nicest audience out there. Very kind people. I always appreciate the interactions, the questions, all that stuff is fantastic. I've been Jeff Ellis. You can find me on Twitter @JeffMLB.